All right, so what do jobs in sales, real estate, fundraising, or recruiting all have in common? Well, they all rely on the sobering task of cold calling people in order to get leads. Mastering this daunting challenge is a hallmark of many Hollywood movies, including The Pursuit of Happiness and The Wolf of Wall Street. The main character's exceptional cold calling abilities is what sets them apart from many of their peers, presumably leading to more sales. I recently watched The Pursuit of Happiness, and there's a scene where the main character talks about having to go through a call sheet, and he realizes that if he doesn't hang up the phone, he can get through more calls per day than his coworkers.
In order not to waste any time, I wasn't hanging up the phone in between calls.
Okay, thank you very much.
I realized that by not hanging up the phone, I gained another 8 minutes a day.
And this got me thinking, could we write an AI program that would automatically call contacts in a call sheet and then only forward the leads that were interested in the product or service that you're selling? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do in today's video. I wrote a Python script that will take an Excel sheet of names and phone numbers and go through each one, calling them individually, and then an AI agent will speak with the person on the other line about whatever product or service you're offering. The AI agent can answer questions, give the person on the other line more information, and then if the person's interested, forward the call to you so that you can close the sale or give the person more information about the product or service. Now to do this, I'm going to use a program called BlandAI. Now if you're not familiar with BlandAI, I've done a couple of videos that I'll link here on using BlandAI with a custom GPT, for example, or using their AI agents to lower your internet bill. Now for this video, I've got all the code and everything you're gonna need in the video description. So go down there and check that out. It also has a sign-up link for BlandAI, and they'll give you 25% off your first order when you use that link. Now, if you enjoy this type of content or you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and like the video. It lets me know what type of content people enjoy, and it really helps me out a lot. Okay, so to begin, I've got an Excel sheet here that has a column of names and then the associated phone numbers. It's important that you have your data formatted exactly how I have here, with the column A labeled as name and column B as phone number. You also need to make sure that you have the country code and then the 10 digits of the phone number after that. BlandAI doesn't specify how many numbers you can have to use their service, hundreds I would assume. You may want to try this out with a smaller data set first just to kind of make sure that it's working right. Once you have your data formatted correctly, then go to File, Save As, and give your file a name. I'm going to call mine Call Sheet Example, just like I have here, and you'll see that it shows file format here, and right now it's set to Excel Workbook. If you click that, you can go to CSV UTF-8, comma delimited .csv. We're going to save this as a CSV file, and that's really important because that's what allows our Python script to talk to our data in the Excel sheet. So go ahead and save that someplace, and we'll come back to that file later. Now we're going to actually set up our BlandAI account. Use the link in the video description to sign up for BlandAI, and once you're signed up, you should see a page that looks something like this. The first thing we're going to do is get what's called an API key, and that's basically a way for BlandAI to talk to your specific BlandAI account through the Python program that we're using today. So go to your account here, and then you'll see API in the top right corner. Click that, and then you'll see this start out API key. Now, API keys are kind of like passwords, so if anybody has this, they can use it to access your account and your credits then. So you want to keep this secret. I'm going to deactivate mine after I publish this video, so don't bother trying to steal mine. Once you've got that, just click this copy button here on the right side, and if you hit this little eyeball, you can actually see the API key, so you see it's this long string of characters. So once you have that copied, now go back to the video description and open the Google Colab that has the Python code that we're going to run today. Now when you open that, it should look something like this. Now if you look on the row down here, it says your BlandAI API key. Go ahead and highlight that and delete it, and then paste the API key that you just copied from BlandAI. Now the program's going to use your API key to talk to your BlandAI account. Next, what we need to do is get the CSV file that we just saved into our Google Colab window. So to do that, we're going to click the file icon here, and you'll see a window that looks like this. Next, click on this Mount Drive button, and that's going to link your Google Drive to your Google Colab session window. It's going to pop up and say, do you want to permit this notebook to access Google Drive? Click Connect to Google Drive, and then that'll take a second to mount. Once that finishes, you'll see this little Drive folder pop up. You can drop that down and navigate to where you want to save your file for your program here. So you can see I've got a couple folders from past videos I've done, and I've got this folder here called Cold Call Assistant. You can click the three dots, and that's how you create new folder. So that's how I created this folder folder specific to this project. So now what I'm going to do is go back to my folder where I saved my CSV file with my Excel data, and then I'm gonna drag it in to my Google Colab, just like this, into that cold call folder. And then you'll see it actually adds it now into my program. Now what you need to do is click the 3 dots and hit copy path. And now if you go into your program again, you'll see your file path right here in large letters. Highlight and delete that, and then paste the file path that you just copied. Now I'm gonna close the folder view so we can see our code better. Now I'm gonna walk you through exactly what this program is doing so you understand what you can modify and customize to make it work for your application. The first thing is this installs the programs that we're going to need to use in our Python library. So you load this each time. Next, you're going to import the programs that you just installed. So that's what this line does. We already talked about this. This is where you're defining the API key for BlandAI. This just sets it up and formats it how BlandAI needs so that it understands how to read your API key. Next here is load the call list from the CSV. So this is actually going to pull in the CSV file from the file path that you pasted here. Next, we're going to actually define what we call the payload for the batch of calls that we're making. Now, the payload is basically defining the parameters for each call that you're going to make. So base prompt is basically the goal of the call that you're going to have for each person that you're calling. So you can see in this example here, I said, you're calling to speak with name about refinancing their mortgage down to 6%. Please tell them it's never been a better time to refinance, and you're calling from Estate of Bliss Realty. If the person is interested, transfer the call to default. Now, I'll explain what these curly brackets and default and name are. So we actually define name just below here. So you can see where it says name, row, and then this is the column A from the Excel sheet. So that's where it's pulling the name from. And then phone number is actually defined as the phone number column that we labeled. So that's why it's important that you have it formatted exactly the same. And then this line here, it basically just says this program's going to go one by one through each row and perform the call. Now, transfer list, this is the phone number if the person on the phone wants to be transferred to a sales representative or a different department that's going to have more information. This is where you're going to define this. So in this example, I've got default, which is if the person's interested, you can transfer the call to default. That's where I'm defining that phone number that the AI agent will then forward the call to. So this would be my phone number, for example. You can also have multiple phone numbers that the AI agent can forward to. For this one, I've just got default and sales. So you could have like billing or something, depending on how complex the call that you're trying to perform is. This next section is kind of cool. So this is where you can define tough to pronounce words that the AI agent is going to pronounce. When I was playing with this, it would say realty, kind of interesting. And so I wanted it to pronounce it realty. Pretty self-explanatory. You put the word that you want it to pronounce correctly, and then you annotate the pronunciation below that. The other way you can use this is for like 3-letter acronyms like API. So when it comes across API, you put A space P space I. It'll make sure and say API and not pronounce appy or something like that. Another pro tip I have for you, you may notice that I put the mortgage as 6% and I spelled out 6%. BlandAI recommends you spell out numbers. The AI agent tends to say those better and handles them better that way. So make sure you put numbers spelled out. Even phone numbers, if you have that in here, I recommend putting it as spelling out the phone number using the words. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the specific things to BlandAI and what they allow you to modify in your call. I got all of this information from their documentation from their website. I'm going to show you where to find that so that you can see the other things that you can modify in this program. So going back to the developer portal, you'll see on the left column here, there's a section under resources called documentation. If you open the documentation, the variables that we're using today are in the send call section. So if you click send call here, it'll actually give you kind of a breakdown of the different variables and parameters that you can adjust. If you look on this side, don't get confused by that. If you click Python, it'll be in a more familiar format. We have ours defined as batch payload, and then these are the different parameters that they'll allow you to modify and kind of show you an example of what it can look like. I've parsed mine down to just some of the more interesting variables, but you can certainly include some of these if you're interested in adding that. This middle section will give you more information on each variable, so it'll tell you how to format it correctly, what some of the different options are, that kind of thing. Going back to our program, the first one we have is models. This is actually the BlandAI model that we're going to be using to talk to people on the phone. So if you go to the model section of the documentation, you'll see that they define model as either enhanced, GPT-4, base, or turbo. And it says it defaults to enhanced, so that means if I didn't include it in my code, it would just automatically use that. But I wanted to show this, so I actually defined it in mine. So you could make it GPT-4 base enhanced or turbo, but they give you some of the trade-offs here. So for our application, enhanced is probably the best to choose. The next thing I've got is wait for greeting. So this is basically telling the AI agent to wait for the person on the other line to say hello or pick up the phone and say something first. It's not just going to start talking as soon as that person picks up the phone. If you want to change that, if you want your AI agent to start talking right away, you can change that to false, and then it'll just start talking as soon as the person picks up the phone. First sentence, pretty self-explanatory. This is going to be the sentence that the AI agent says when the person picks up or when it first starts talking. So I have mine set to, hi there, calling about refinancing your mortgage down to 6%. Are you the current homeowner? So for voice ID, you can actually change the voice of the AI agent and even set it to a custom voice if you want. Again, I covered this in a past video on how you can make a custom voice, but I'll show you how you can change and use some of the default voices that they have from BlandAI. So if you go back to the developer portal, you'll see a section here called voices. So if you click on that, it's got voice presets or your voices. If you click on your voices, there's a voice ID that's set here. You can decide if you want your AI agent to sound like Ryan or Adriana, whoever. You just need to copy this long string. It looks like they've added a lot more voices since I was first on here. So I'm going to use one of these other voices in my program for this example. So let's use Josh. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it here where it says voice ID in quotation marks. So now it's going to use the Josh voice for each of the calls, and you can change that to whatever you'd like. Okay, after that, there's reduce latency. This is basically how quickly you want the AI agent to respond. So if you want it to have more of a natural conversational flow, you want to set this to true. If you don't have this set to true, there can be like a lag or a delay when the person's talking or asks a question. I have this set to true, and I think that's probably the best. Temperature is how creative you want the AI agent to be. If I go back to the documentation, it tells you that you can set it from a value of 0 and 1, and it controls the randomness of the LLM. 0 causes more deterministic outputs, while 1 will cause more random. In this program, I have it set to 0.7 test mode, so this is important. So when you're first setting up this program, you want to set this to true. So what this does is you've got a call sheet of, let's say, 100 numbers, and you're testing it out. You don't want it to just start calling all 100 numbers while you're trying to get it figured out. So if you set this to true, it will only call the first number in the Excel sheet. So when I was playing with this, I set the first number to my phone number, and then that way I could talk with the AI agent and make sure that it was working the way that I wanted it to work. Campaign ID and label, these are just ways to label the batch of calls that it's going to be making so that you can kind of manage it from your BlandAI account. Okay, so now we've defined the payload that we're going to be sending for each of the calls. This next section is just how we send the call. So when you run the program, it'll actually send all of that for each line of the Excel sheet. This next section here is just a way for us to get a printout of whether it successfully started the calls or if it errored out and had a problem. So if it works, it'll say batch sent successfully, and if it fails, you'll get this failed to send batch printout in the code down below. So that's useful because it lets you know the code's working as you want, like you wanted it to. So now this thing's running, and you're like, okay, I hope it's working, or what's the feedback? Are people picking up? Is it just going to voicemail? Are people asking to be transferred? So this next section allows you to generate a report of the batch of calls that you're sending. So you can run this at any time, presumably after it's been running for a little bit so that you actually get some data on the calls that it's making. But it'll create this report based on the goal that you set, and then it'll ask this question for each call, and then give you an answer for each of these questions in a report format. So for this, I'm saying, are customers interested in refinancing their mortgage? And for each call, I want to know who answered the call. Was it a human or did it go to voicemail? Was the customer interested in refinancing? Yes or no? Did they ask to be transferred? Yes or no? And what reason did the customer have for not wanting to refinance? You'll notice for this one, I set it to string. So what that is it allows it to be more than just a yes, no, or a numerical answer. This is going to be what you call a string of characters or words. So, the customer may say, I'm not interested because my rate's lower than 6% right now. This just lets you know that the report worked correctly and then define some of the variables based on the questions I asked. You can modify this goal and these questions as well as the response and variables. It'll print this report then in the window right here for the calls that it's already completed. And then commented out here, you'll see this hashtag sign. If you remove that hashtag sign, then it'll actually save the report as a CSV file in your Google Drive in the folder here. So So, if you have 100 calls with statuses and reports and everything, you'll want it to save as a report so that you can look at it more easily in Excel and be able to do more with the data there. And then if for whatever reason this code doesn't work, it'll tell you failed to analyze batch. And so there's something going on up here that didn't work right. You can run this section here and it'll actually stop the batch of calls so it doesn't have to just finish through the rest of the calls that you're making. So that's kind of the emergency brake, if you will, that allows you to stop this thing from running. But that's pretty much it. So again, to run this, you're just gonna hit these little play buttons. I'll run this one just so we can kind of see an example of what it should look like when it runs. So you see this little green check mark, that means it's completed, and then you'll run this one. And if it runs successfully, you should get the little check mark here. And then at the bottom, it'll say batch sent successfully. So now it's gonna start going through the call sheet, but because I have the test mode set as true, it's only gonna call the very first number in the call sheet. So again, if you want this to run for the entire call sheet, you need to change this to false. Now I can run the analysis report. It should only have one call that it's performed. And you can see this is the printout that it has here. So batch analyzed successfully. It gives you the call ID. So each call is gonna have a unique ID. And then answered by, it says NA here. The call may not be completed yet, or because I'm in test mode, it may not generate it. And then interested in refinancing, and then it'll be the result here. And then asked to be transferred and reason not interested. So you can kind of see they're like right justified basically. But if you had 100 numbers, it would have 100 call IDs and go all the way down. And if while it's running, you wanted to stop sending the calls and proceeding through the call sheet, you can use the bottom one here to stop the call. But that's pretty much it. So again, I have all of the code and links in the video description. If you use the link to sign up for BlandAI, they'll give you 25% off. So definitely use that. And if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me out a lot and lets me know what type of content people enjoy. But that's all for now. So until next time, thanks.